And it used to be a breakfast from me. Glenn is, we did some renovation work in the Jewett Library this past summer, working with, we have an interdisciplinary team working on that. We had Rosalind Schmidt, I don't know if you know Rosalind from Building Services, the Jewett team, and then Jen Sublett Williamson works with the libraries along with me. So we have DART, construction, and building services working collaboratively on this project. So Glenn's going to talk a little bit about that, frame it around with questions that she had in the race.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. And then we'll just listen to your questions
and there, one thing I want to know, it's not just Jewett. There were 2 middle school libraries that were done. Walton and Jewett had some work done. And so we're both works in progress at this point. I personally think Walton did a really, really good job. I can talk to Jewett's Gold specifically and then what I saw down at Walton, and Rosalind can add some more about the Walton piece. But our key things when we sat down and talked with parents and administration and faculty and students was we needed flexibility in our library. We needed this space to be very multi-purpose. We needed small group spaces for smaller groups of students to work, not just a big class. We needed it to be inviting to teens. I kept saying I want it to be Barnes & Noble without the cafe. I want Barnes & Noble without the Starbucks. I want Barnes & Noble, I wanted them in there. And I need clear sight lines to every corner of that library because they're middle schoolers. So this is sort of what we had and what we went to. So on the left we had these tall fixed shelves. You can see they're taller than I am. It doesn't say a lot, but they were very tall. And so you can see how dark it is in the shelves. If I was doing a class and needed to use the projector and we turned the lights off, I'd have to give kids flashlights to go find books on the shelves because you couldn't see back there. What we've gone to are on the right, these short shelves, and all of these are on casters. They all move. So we can rearrange that space if we need to. We had a big corner of our space, the 2/3 of it maybe, was set up as instructional space with these massive mission-style tables and chairs, and there it was, and books all around and stuff. In the top one, you're looking at the same corner of the library. So we took out a lot of bookshelves. They used paint to create areas. We've got this collaborative instructional space now that is literally a whiteboard wall. You would have died the other week. I was doing a lesson, and I had 6th graders, and we did a sorting thing on posters that I put up here. This is before all the furniture and the chairs are just decorated. So I had these posters, and they were going up, and they were sorting things all over the place. And then we switched to the projectors here, and I could project onto this whiteboard. And there was something I wanted to point out, and I took a marker, and I drew a circle on it, and I went over here, and I wrote something down. And these 6th graders went, she wrote on the wall. And somebody said, no, I believe it's a whiteboard. Somebody says, are you sure? They were so funny. So you can see the activities, like this is our Friday ESL group. We get the 3 classes together and they come in and we simply play word games. And we just took to doing this goofball, silly word game on the whiteboard. And I mean, the activity, and that was just one of the classes. We had room enough to have all 3 classes going to the front of the board. It's a great space. We had very nice furniture, very heavy furniture. And so, and I had introduced like beanbag chairs, and we had tried to have little groupings and stuff. This stuff was hulky. Well now, those girls are sitting in these neat tables that Rosalind found, or chairs, and the table in between, you see the hookups? You can plug in your e-reader, you can plug in your computer and reduce it and all that stuff. Here's the couch. This is an S-shaped couch. They are falling off. They love it. It just arrived Friday, and every class has had maximum time in there this week on the couch. They love it. And it's also a sectional, so I can divide it up and I can move it and restage it. The tables are all narrow, but today I put them together and it makes a nice 4-pod. They're on casters. The chairs are designed, I swear, with middle school boys in mind. You can rock a lot, but it's really hard to tip it back. You can turn them and sit backwards in it, and it is as comfortable if you're sitting forwards. And I've been granting them open permission, if that's what it takes for you to focus on this lesson, turn the chair around, sit backwards. They love it. That is the thing they love the most. So the furniture really suits them. We went from this bank of 2 rows of 6 computers to computer pods. So we've got 2 computers and 4 computers and 2 stand-up stations are coming. So it's much more, and there's more space between them. This was set up so that you sat there like this, typing, keyboarding, and it was pretty difficult to do. So now we've got pods, and that's going to work out well. And what we did was we took office space and realigned it, and we put computers in there. The goal is to outfit everything with like a video camera, a still camera, all the things they would need to create stuff. Think in terms of what they're calling a maker space. And this is what I think Walton has done. We kind of turned over the spaces first. We've got, ours is green, but we could make a TV studio here and have essentially a green screen in the background and shoot things on it. We don't get as much use out of it yet, so that's where I think we're still working on that. We need to get more equipment. We need to get our teachers to realize what they could do in this space. We've got plans for even adding a little bit more of the small workspace that's bigger than this one. But we aren't using offices. We're giving that up.
It's not me.
How lovely. So, at any rate, yeah, no, that's not what they do. So, that's just a little bit of what we've done. But it's really neat to see the way the kids have responded.
Here you go, Billy. It's yours. I think it might be Diane.
It is, I think. So, it's just really, really neat to see the way the kids are gravitating in here. Now the next step, I think, is to get our teachers in here and realizing the possibilities and the potential, and that we do have these small spaces available, and what we can do with that. We've had a couple of groups come in and use the instructional space, but use it for different purposes, and so realigning tables and just doing all sorts of stuff. So it's just giving us possibilities of what we can do. Walton, what does she have down there, Rosalind? She's taken some of those back rooms, and what has she made them into?
So, like you said, we do both projects, and I would say Julie was definitely about the stuff, the furniture. That was a lot of money went into furniture, and that's the flexibility. Walton really got the hard hats out and knocked some walls down. Hers is more about creating these small rooms that she uses for small group instruction, for independent learning, one's a recording studio. So she has created more of the spaces. So I'm curious to see how the 2 spaces kind of evolve and get used, because there was a kind of not that one way was better than the other, but it was definitely
It was just a different need for the 2 different schools, and that was really neat, that we weren't tied down to because you're a middle school, your library will be like this and will function like this. We have different populations.
And the process was very collaborative. We sat down with a team of teachers and administrators and the librarian at each of the schools with a set of guiding questions, prepared to talk with a group of architects to go through a discovery with them. And then there was the prototyping stages. And like Rosalind said, it's 2 very different. The original footprints of the 2 libraries are very similar, but what they look like now is very different. But in both cases, the kids and the educators in the spaces are making use of some of the changes that we made, basically with their design specs in mind. So.
Do they still have the same number of books and
I do, yeah.
things
I like
that they do?
I guess students came in the beginning of the year, they were convinced that they should gotten rid of books. Because we got rid of all the wall shelves, and students were convinced that they were less books.
They're a little bit more compressed, and we move things around. It's really working out well, because before it was sort of, I don't know, it was a bit choppy. And so now I'm loving the way it's arranged now, and they're finding things very easily, and it's working out
And
just fine.
there's a sweet spot with the size of your collection and actually
Mhm.
the usability of your collection.
Mhm.
And we've been working now for 3 years to move our libraries to that sweet spot.
Mhm.
And so when we have some opportunities, we've got folks that you walk into many of our libraries right now, and simply because they've actually followed the professional practices for reading, we have more empty space, and then now you're seeing folks repurpose that space also and take advantage of it.
Well,
But
Pam, you would, okay, when I got to Jewett 6 years ago, we had 10,000 volumes, we're down to 7,000. But our usage rates have tripled, and I think it's because they can actually get to the books, and what they've got is good stuff. And there's an old adage in library land that, you know, if you get rid of it, you'll get more, you know, you've got to keep it moving and changing it up and keeping it current. We've raised the copyright date from 1983 to just over 2000
as an average.
and as an average copyright date, and you do that mostly by reading, not by buying new. You get rid of the old, and it really, really works. So, yeah, we haven't cut that at all.
But they're classics that you won't get rid of.
Oh, yeah,
because
and they
they're
put- and they,
they're
you know,
still used and in use.
Mark Twain's gonna pull your copyright age way down, you know, but yeah, and we'll still have that, but yeah, we're making out pretty well.
I would say, I mean, there's definitely traditional roles in the library, and I think one of the goals was to maintain those, you know, and it was how do you add to it, not prohibit or inhibit,
Mhm.
checking out books, you know,
Mhm.
so.
And the key thing that just kept coming back time and time again was the flexibility of the space, and that's what we've really gained.
And do you still use the space for what would, you know, traditionally be thought of as a library activity?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So
Absolutely.
kids can come in there and do research or whatever.
Mhm. Yep, we're getting ready to start research stuff, and there'll be small groups of kids coming in at different times all day long, and
One of the things too that's interesting in having an elementary or middle school librarian here, they could speak to this better than I, but we tend to guarantee access to the school library and schedule the access at the elementary level. So when you look at Christie, with how many homerooms do you have? 8 homerooms. Let's say an hour a week, a class is scheduled in there. That's only 8 hours a week. So what's happening in that space the rest of the time is critical. That's actually where most of the good stuff's gonna happen. Not to take away from anything
Not
you
in
do
my
in your
hour.
library.
Come on.
But- And then Lynn, it's more kids choosing to access the library at the times that they can, and teachers that have a specific instructional need, and they make appointments with the library and the librarian, but kids aren't scheduled at the middle school, you know, for a 30-minute library session every week. So that, looking at how do we maintain library services, but also create a space that is the best classroom in the school, the most flexible classroom in the school, because that's the one place that's really accessible to everybody.
And I think, I was visiting briefly with Ira that one day, and we were talking about examples of people who use the space, and Lynn, her first example was, oh, we just had a math class in here. And I think that just like, was very profound, that, you know, who would have thought that was your first example, was the use of a library from a math class.
And I'm gonna say this, and this is just a fact. We have to, as a system, figure out how to do testing in our buildings without closing the library. I mean, when we hit heavy testing periods, because you can pull 25 or 30 kids in and set them up with laptops and test them, and it's efficient, but that means during SOLs, for 3 weeks of the year, the library is essentially off, out of
At
bounds
some
for people.
schools.
At some,
That is
now
a
some have
building
figured
level,
it out,
that
right,
is a building level
right.
decision.
But, you know, it is an important thing, and, you know, that's crucial, because that's just the time when people could be doing all sorts of neat, nifty things, you know, the pressure of that SOL is over, and they could be doing all sorts of neat research projects, and they can't get to the library.
But Lynn, I know you still go above and beyond with your library on the cart. I mean, you're still
We've
circulating.
done that, I'm still
the
circulating some,
spaces.
yeah, so, yeah, but it is, you know, you know, it's access and denial of access or limited access that's troublesome. So there are ways around it, but we do need to think of creative ways to solve that problem.
So let's let the board members take a few minutes to
Yeah.
reflect on your notes. Christie, are you ready to go? And
So, do kids have the opportunity also to say, and do you like to like use iPads and whatnot? And I mean, and do you have access to books that can be downloaded?
Yes and no. We own some ebooks. They aren't used very often. They tie in with our curriculum. They dovetail it beautifully. I try to get the teachers using them so that the kids are using them. I've taken our whole reference section. You know, when you used to go in there and be a reference section, you couldn't check it out, but you could use it there. Our entire reference collection is online. Now, we still have a print encyclopedia because the state requires that they know how to use guide words and things like that, so they have to practice. But it's, you know, we've got that going. A lot of kids are using their own devices. If those tables are used to plug up and charge, it's the kids' own ebooks. We have iPads in the building, but they're traditionally checked out to be used in an entire classroom. So using them, you know, one-on-one. But I have a lot of kids reading on their iPhones, reading on their Nooks and Kindles and things like that. And that's going real well.
How do you monitor that?
I just
there you go.
I just pop over and say, what you reading? And they'll say, oh, such and such. I'll say, oh, that's really good. And it's, you know, we'll start talking about the book, and you know, you just have to keep a finger on it.
And they have all these reference materials, and I mean, these are all online now?
24/7 access with a password. The password protected, but we got that disseminated.
So
And
is that like to Gales?
yeah, they're the databases that the county provides. And then we've gotten some extra, you know, like, you know, there's one, oh, I forget the publisher's name, but it's Animals of the World. You know, and so it's like a short encyclopedia set just of animals, and that's all there. We've got a really neat one about Native Americans, and the 6th grade history curriculum, or social studies curriculum fits right in, and they do a project using that.
And so the kids are basically taught how to use those
Yes.
reference materials?
Yes.
And how to cite the primary sources?
Yes.
And that sort of thing?
Yep, and that's a developmental thing. I mean, it's, you know, you can see it growing and growing. And the neat thing is I was a librarian out at Western for 6 years, so I've seen that end of it, and now I'm much better able to feed into that thing.
And are they taught to think critically in terms of the sources that they're assessing?
It's funny you should ask, that's my TPA goal for the year. So I'm working with some 8th
I'm
graders.
an analyst, I think.
I don't know, I'm thinking about, well, I'm doing 8th graders and I'm doing a small group of 6th graders. And we're taking the SOLs, and it's basically, you know, is the source reliable, is it biased? And we've got these 5 things, and I've just collected my first data. We're gonna do the
So
analysis of
they're
that tomorrow.
taught to sort of, I mean, this is important.
It's probably the most
You
crucial
know,
thing
be
that
able
we
to
learn.
look at a
Yeah.
source, you know, that they find online and
Right.
they'd be able to say,
That's
this is a viable,
Right.
valid source, it comes from a good place,
Mhm.
whereas
Mhm.
this is something I need to think
Right.
seriously about it being not so good.
Right, and that's exactly, I really think that is the most important lifelong learning skill we can teach them in this century, because they're just bombarded with information, and they just have to be able to get rid of the
Exactly.
garbage.
Exactly.
And they have to be able to sort through it and say, oh, yeah. This one kid, they were doing the pretest, and of course now I'm not allowed to give any instruction or anything like that. And he looked at me and said, where the heck is this coming from? Because we had a piece and there were obviously things left out. And I said, that's a really good question. And somebody said, is this new stuff or is this old stuff? And they just started going down it naturally. Now that was one of our advanced 8th grade classes, but I was like, yes, they're, you know.
That's very important, because
It
we're
is.
talking about learning standards and for today.
Mhm.
And, you know, books are great. I love books. You know, I love the smell of a library. You can't get me out. You know, at the bookstore, you can't get me out. You know, I go on a Saturday night to Barnes and Nobles. That's where you may find me. Seriously. But at the same time, lifelong learning standards for this
Yes.
century
Yes.
pretty much mandate that you can do anything on a smartphone and you can look up anything, and kids need to know what's good information and what's bad information.
Yeah, and we'll transition, but another piece too is that the Virginia SOL has beefed up its information literacy standards within the language arts curriculum.
Yep.
And we have our librarians and our K-12 teachers of English, which at the elementary level is darn near everybody, attended preschool workshops on what those standards meant, and the librarians are poised to support that classroom instruction as well as to support the new SOL that will be tested. They will be tested using the technology enhanced item format.
Yeah, and we had no
They
idea
will
what
be
that's gonna
tested.
look like, yeah.
So,
that
so we may very well
Yeah.
have kids, analyzing a URL
Mhm.
to
Oh.
create,
Mhm.
to say whether or not, put it on a reliability scale or something like that. So imagine taking 3 URLs and putting them on a reliability continuum.
Mhm.
That could be a 5th grade technology enhanced item, based on, whether or not it's .gov, .edu, .com, .org, whatever.
And
So
that is certainly a changing experience.
it is a
Right.
very,
And,
Yes.
because years ago, I know when we were in school, even when we were in college, or most of us, or some of us, you went to the
and
library.
you ask the research
The
librarian.
research librarian might tell you where to go, or maybe tell you where to go, really go. Or, you'd go to the reference section and, you would kind of know, oh, well, this is, I shouldn't use an encyclopedia, but I can use this almanac or something. And it was pretty cut and dry. If the almanac was in the library, it was kind of it was a valid source.
Right.
And I think how experiences are changing is that use of technology and having so much out there, and how do you discriminate against what is good stuff, what is bad stuff, what would be a good source versus what would be a bad source, and how to be safe out there with what you're doing. I mean, all of that has got to be part of, when we look at how student experiences are changing, I don't think there's anywhere as much as going to the library and looking for information, and it can be on any topic. It could be on math, or it could be on history, or whatever. I think that's got to be a center in the school for, one, finding information, but also for being able to use the technology and know how to use technology, because this century is all about information.
Yeah.
And that has got to be the first place, and at the elementary school level.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Where we have to show kids just from the very get-go, this is where you look, this is how you search for stuff, this is how you figure out what's good and what's bad. And that's why I think, in terms of student experiences with a library, that's really, very first from the get-go, where you're gonna be bombarded with technology. You have to be, that's part of the way it is. So I'm looking at that as question 2 is, in my opinion, that's got to be your primary, way of teaching kids there. I think the learning spaces are great. I know that in the old days, going to the library was sort of like this institution. No, seriously.
And we were shushed, right?
And you go in there, yeah, and, you don't say anything,
I wasn't
you don't,
shushing you.
no.
I was-
But yes, and it seems now that also might be changing, but the question is, are all libraries changing? So if a kid's gonna go down here to the library down here, can they do the same things? So
Well,
the
we're gonna
question
hear-
is, are we teaching good library etiquette?
Well, we're gonna hear about another library that it has changing and is still changing, and it has changed and is still changing.
Changing
So-
every day.
So Christie?
Yes, I'm glad to be here this evening to share the Library on the Bus project with you. This is not an idea original to us. This was one of those tweets from Pam Moran. And boy golly, it hasn't even been a month. It was just early October, so we are still very much in the planning stages here. But Pam tweeted an article about a bus driver in Prince William County who was being recognized by the Virginia Education Association for his commitment to the education of his bus riders, even while they were on the bus. And so I looked at the story and I said, wow, that's perfect for Yancey, number one, the majority of our children are transported by bus, both to and from school. We have a very small number of car riders. And number two, as a teacher and a librarian, anytime you could keep text in front of children, I'm all for that. So it seemed like a really good fit. So I told Pam, I said, sure, I'm interested. Well, you know, that's like pouring gasoline on something. So she's like, yeah, okay. She said, get in touch with Jim Foley. So I emailed Jim, and we've been in the planning phase.
If
for
we lose
the
this
last couple of
projector,
weeks.
the signal seems to be stable to that one, so if we lose this projector, let's just switch our view a little bit.
So here are the partners that are working together so far. Jim, of course, as our Director of Transportation Services. We're also working with Tom Scott, an Esmont resident and our lead driver at Yancey. Mary Clark, her bus will be the one we actually use as the pilot. Mary has driven for Yancey for 11 years. She is a member of the community. She is deeply committed to the success of the children. So she already has a deep relationship with these children and their older brothers and sisters and their parents. And she's really a part of our critical mass with this. Our pilot group will be Mary Clark's bus for afternoon run, which averages about 26 students. The longest ride on that bus is just under 45 minutes. The shortest is under 5. So an average time in transit for those children is 25 minutes, which is a nice amount of time for them to do some reading. The population split, we have Head Start, kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, about 16 kids, and then 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders are about 10. So we're looking at ways that we can group those children, some of the, do some mentoring, the older kids paired up with the younger children on the bus. Now, I haven't started the program yet. Jim and I, like I said, are still planning. But I did have an opportunity to talk with some of our 5th graders about the project. So they came up instantly with a huge list of benefits, things that they liked about it, reasons this would be good for all students. Today was book character dress-up day at Yancey. So you might see some unusual attire, but we had a lively and enjoyable day celebrating reading. Oops. Let's see. There it is.
Hi, my name's Sandra, and we're in 2nd grade. We ride Miss Mary's bus. My name is Bryce, and I ride Miss Mary's bus. My name is Kaylee. I'm in 2nd grade. I ride on Miss Mary's bus.
Greetings from Yancey. I'm Destiny. And I'm Rachel. And we're in 5th grade. And we ride Miss Mary's bus. We really would have liked to be there today, but it was a little past our bedtime. We think that library on the bus is a good idea because if you forget your book at school or at home, you'll have something to choose from. My bus ride is 45 minutes long, and mine is half an hour. So we think it would be a good idea to have library on the bus because we have a long bus ride. We think another good reason to have library on the bus is because it gets a little boring on the bus, and when you have a book, it helps pass the time. We both have little brothers on the bus, so I think we should have library on the bus to read to them. And so they get a little rowdy sometimes, and I think it's a good idea to read to them on the bus so they have something to do. As 5th graders, part of our homework is reading for 30 minutes. So I think library on the bus is a good idea because you can get most or all of it done by the time you get home. I would probably get all of it done because me and my brother are the last ones off the bus. Thank you for your interest in Yancey's Library on the Bus program. We'll report back to you once we get it up and rolling.
Quite a producer, Chrissy.
Oh my, it was the energy of the day, I tell you what. We had 3 times as many outtakes as that we ended up with. They were on the money today. So our goals for the project essentially are, we want to capture and really capitalize on that time that's already encumbered to the school day. We have those little darlings until they get off the bus, or from the moment they get on in the morning until they come into the school. So we're able to keep them engaged, get them started or begin or end their day in a nice, calm way. We hope to create relationships between the younger students and the older ones and really create some community on that bus so that the ride is safe, the climate is calm, and that they're engaged in text. So now we're kind of facing the nuts and bolts of the project. These are some of our action steps. We need to create a secure and portable system for book storage. So Jim and I have talked about that, and Tom Scott, the lead driver, has expressed an interest in working with us to create some kind of container. We're talking about paperback books for weight, obviously. We're also looking for funding or a donation source for books to get the program started on that pilot bus. We'll be developing some ways to train those older students to serve as mentors for their younger peers. And then we're also looking ahead, because we know not all students are going to be physically comfortable with reading in a moving vehicle. We would like to expand in the future and actually have some MP3 players at the school that are dedicated to this type of purpose so that they can be listening or reading, so that they have that as an option. So we're excited to get started.
This is killer.
I had a meeting Tuesday.
Right?
Yep.
And then the other big benefit to this that I see is improvement in student behavior management. Peaceful School Bus would tell you that a calm bus ride is one where the students have responsibility for the social climate on the bus. And by doing this mentoring with the fifth graders and the younger students, it would really help create a more peaceful ride. And Mary was chosen. Tom's route is fairly short and the kids are very well behaved. Mary's group's a little more challenging. So we didn't want an easy pilot, right? So want a little bit of a challenge. And Mary's, I think, the perfect driver to do this. She's very caring. And just from a personal situation, I think it's a good time for her to get involved in something like this. So.
Will the driver have to intervene with the students over the materials?
Well,
That probably would
that's
be
our goal, to
possible.
ensure that it really is student directed, that she does not have to
Yeah.
be distracted or
Right.
in any way involved in the distribution of material. If at the end of their ride, if the child wants to keep the book and finish it overnight, that's fine with me. So we are going to experience a fair amount of a shift in the collection that's available, and I understand we'll have to be replacing some things. But if the book ends up in a child's home, there are worse things that could happen.
Yeah, that's true.
It sounds like it's pretty empowering for the fifth graders as well, in terms of leadership and taking charge of things. I mean, yes, the fifth graders have been sort of the leaders or the seniors in their schools, but this is, it seems to be much more empowering for them, to see that, they're in a position where, they can help control things on the bus and mentor the younger students. And that's a little bit different than I remember elementary school doing.
That's what we're hoping for.
Good. Yeah. I guess so that goes towards establishing a community of learners and learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hits that one on the head.
So how do you board members see that changing the learning spaces in these two situations that you've experienced tonight are creating different ways for relationships, relevance, and rigor to change?
Well, I would say that opening up the space makes it more amenable to students, and teachers working together. And, you're not feeling, as isolated. Your students are not feeling as isolated, and the library is sort of no longer a solitary activity where you would go in and, I mean, the introverts amongst us might not be happy about that necessarily, but I would say that the library is being seen or being touted perhaps as not necessarily a solitary thing. You go in and you do your research and you find your book. It's much more of a opening, welcoming space, which I think is good in some ways, although I think you also have to remember that some people are introverted and do need their space. And so I would hate to see it lose some of that ability to feel like you can go in and do research and do solitary research as
You
well.
want to talk about how you envision that playing out in your new space with middle schoolers?
Well, it already is. I mean, okay, we've got a middle schooler who spends part of his day at taking high school classes at Murray. And he comes back and there's a part of it where it doesn't quite mesh exactly with our schedule. So he's in our room. He's one of these kids who he wants it quiet. So he checks in with me and he says, I'm here. Is there a class coming in? Is there anything going on? If not, he uses the main space, and just sort of a nook and cranny of the main space. If there is, he's got the small group space that we've done, which really is small. I mean, when we're talking small groups, we're talking 3 kids, something like that, like to shoot a little newscast video or something, and he just goes in there and works. And so we're, you know, we've got that flex for that too. One thing,
Did you have that last year?
not as much.
You didn't have the small group space.
Yeah,
You
not-
had
not nearly
created
as
that,
workable.
So that was.
And one thing we asked for, and we just can't accommodate with the spaces, remember we wanted, I don't want to say performance, but we wanted a presentation space so that when kids had worked hard on a presentation and they needed to publish it, and by publish, you know, go public with it, and we wanted a space that looked professional. Like we wanted a little riser area in the corner that you'd be up, there'd be a lectern, you could give your presentation, you'd have the slides and the remote, you know, and it would be, you know, one bump up from what they're doing when they're in a classroom and they stand and go, well, this is my project and I looked at Thomas Jefferson and then, you know, and it, you know, so it'd be more on, it'd be a bump up. I'm looking for ways we can accomplish that in the space we've got, you know, because we just didn't have enough to have a little riser thing and, you know, do all that, but I want to do that. Because you know, and that way too, the library, we can come full circle. They can be there and they can start their projects and do the research. They can get help. They can come in as a small group and edit their production or whatever, and then they can present it, and it's all wrapped around that. And I think that'd be kind of fun.
Barbara,
Do you envision, just to follow up on the individual researcher, do you think that a person who likes to research at least some of the time quietly is the very, very unusual person? That's the way
In middle school.
portrayed it.
In middle school, I
Okay.
think. I mean, because the social thing in middle school is the primary thing. I mean, they have to be with their friends nonstop. And so I even buy books so that friends can read the same book at the same time. You know, I mean, I make purchases consciously with that. So at middle school, I don't think, when I was at the high school, there we need some differentiation. Because, yeah, then you've got your kids who are researchers and want to go it alone. But at middle school, I just don't see that much, you know. And if they do, I've got some small spaces we can accommodate, but, you know, that's the nature of the beast.
I hear you. And in high school, just since you mentioned that, I mean, is there a type of research that almost everyone should try alone because of just the independent thinking and following something?
I think so.
Trail and stuff? Yeah, I mean, that's what I think, and that's what I grew up with. Has that been,
Has
that kind of gone by the boards?
No, I think
we saw a lot of
teachers,
that.
teachers completely balance that individual and group work. And I think, you know, and part of that, you know, is just good thinking about the kinds of experiences that kids need. So you absolutely, I mean, and even the teachers working together, American Studies is a great example, and you can speak to this, having been a librarian at Western for years. You've got a social studies teacher working with an English 11 teacher, U.S. Virginia history working with an English 11 teacher. They're collaborating, the kids see them collaborating, but they're even in classrooms with walls that can come down between the two classrooms. Sometimes the wall's open, sometimes the wall's closed. Sometimes the kids are working as a social studies class, sometimes they're working as a collaborative class. That's the real world now, is moving in and out of the way that we work together. So I think that's something that trying to give kids those experiences in multiple ways. The science group is learning about some of the collaboration work that's happening in science. But in Michelle Karpovich's room, when it comes down to it, you're individually accountable for learning chemistry. And
See,
she's got
that's
structures
the
in
thing
place.
I'm wondering, I mean, we're doing all this emphasis, and there seems to be a lot of emphasis on collaboration, kids working together, collaboration, and then they go take the SOLs by themselves. You know? I mean, there's got to be a point in time when you teach a kid how to do their own work, their own research, you know, and they're going to do that in college, you know, more or less. I mean, if you're going to work where I work, you're going to do most of your work on your own. There may be this belief that there's collaboration, but in fact, you go off and do your work, you go off and do your work, you go off and do your work. And then maybe you'll get back together and collaborate. So, I mean, kids, in my opinion, still need to have that, they have to know how to do this. They have to know how to work on their own.
Well,
And in the framework for quality learning, one of the strategies that's promoted in there is the strategy. It's a strategy that gets a lot of bang for the buck when it's done well, and that's cooperative learning. And in cooperative learning, you absolutely you have individual accountability, but you also have promotive interactions at the group level. So teachers are working to design learning activities where the kids do come in and out of that.
And I think the state's new mandate that everyone have an online course for graduation is going to be very interesting, because while the three of us who work very well independently will probably be able to nail that and be disciplined enough to do it,
Right.
there are going to be kids where that's just fighting every natural instinct that they've got. And so it's going to be very interesting. I for one, am really glad the state has put that in. And I want to see us as a division do even more with that. And one thing I've floated is, so we have an independent study course that is online, basically online, and maybe has some face-to-face that is about research and conducting research. And the kids pick an area that they want to research. And then with a librarian and probably a mentor maybe from the community or somebody in-house, and they do this course, and there are modules that are online about the basic research things. And then, they can, I can see a semester elective at the high schools that would be great. And it fulfills that online thing, and, it does all sorts. But that online thing's going to be, I was just reading today, the newest issue of Time has what is higher education coming to, and all these online things.
I mean, I
And
can understand that.
there are going to be people who do really well at it, and then there are going to
Right.
be people who just need to learn the skills to do that kind of
Physically,
learning
you
too.
travel to go to workshops
Yeah.
as much as you
Yeah,
engage
Because
in
it's-
online
it's a whole
workshops.
different way.
So,
So,
Other questions from the board members? We've got about 10 more minutes before folks will be transitioning.
How does the elementary school experience funnel into what we just were talking about? Whether to do things collaboratively or independently, which things to do collaboratively, which things to do independently?
We really do have a blended approach. We do both interchangeably, like Becky said. One of the things that I start in second grade is doing a guided research project with the students. And after we complete one together, then they pick their own topics. And in second grade, when they're still very new to, taking notes or writing things down, it can get a little hairy, but it's a fascinating experience to see them choose what they're interested in. To me, that's the benefit of a good elementary program, because you're building that curiosity. What do you wonder about? And you give the kid that ownership of choice. And then once you've hooked them that way, they're willing to go along and learn whatever steps that the teacher or the librarian feel are the appropriate means of a research model, but they've got that interest.
Yeah.
I would just add to that, at the elementary level, we work really hard to teach the kids how to work collaboratively with one another. Likewise, we teach them how to work independently too. So some of the questions that you were talking about that independence later on, it's something that we don't take for granted, that they just can naturally know it. And that starts as early as kindergarten.
Yeah, I know one thing, just, from working in groups, it just, I don't know, maybe kids don't do this, but I think working in groups, sometimes you've got some people that are naturally very active and perhaps extroverted enough to commandeer the group. And either
People like me. People like me.
they either end up doing all the work,
No, I'll commandeer the group.
or
Make it clear to do all the work.
because there are people who are latching onto the group and don't want to do any of the work, they end up doing all the work. I mean, I just find, personally, that I don't necessarily like to work in groups because it ends up that I end up doing the work. And quite frankly, if I'm going to do the work, it's going to be mine. And so I don't know how you control that.
Well, and part of that too, Pam, I think one of our challenges is to help kids develop the skill set and the mindset to deal with that.
And to identify their own strengths.
And
what is
absolutely,
their learning
yeah.
style?
And that, that one of the lifelong learner standard about metacognition, in a good group task, the kids will be in a position of reflecting on their own, and they will see, I kept the group entertained while you did all the work, and if we can come to that realization and then make a plan for what we're going to do differently next time. So skilled teachers, and Christy is our one nationally board certified teacher who is a librarian. We've got another one that hopefully we'll hear about in November, and then more in the going through that program also. But when you look at people that have the skill set and the mindset of Lynn and Christy here, they're moving in and out of that, teaching kids how to learn alone, teaching kids how to learn together, teaching kids how to negotiate conflicts. That's part of what's going on with the bus project right there. What do we do when a kid gets a book and they're riding down the road and it's not the book they wanted? Well, guess what? We can't just walk down the aisle of the bus and change. So who's going to monitor that? Not the bus
And that's the
driver.
thing. There's got to be that monitoring on group work, and I'm afraid that monitoring is not always there. I know even 10 years ago when my kids were in school and they would do group projects, they would complain to me that so-and-so is not doing the work and the teacher's not doing anything, but I still have to have my project in next week, And so what do I do? And if I don't turn in my project and the so-and-so, hasn't been there with their work, I mean, we're so focused on this, we have to collaborate, but we forget that not everybody's there for the handout.
Well, and I think we're doing a better job of teaching kids how to do that through Responsive Classroom, through AVID, through restorative practices at the secondary level. We've got a lot of programs in place that provide teachers some structures and the kids some of the language to negotiate some of those situations better.
One of the things, Pam, if we said, we said before that evaluating sources is one of the most critical skills we can teach. One of probably the next on my list is that kids learn to evaluate their own work and assess their own work.
Yes,
I think that's absolutely crucial, and it's showing up more and more and more on skills that kids need. But if you can't, if I'm going to do a presentation, even, for sixth graders, which I do day in and day out, I still have to be able to afterwards say, didn't flow the way I wanted it to, this transition didn't work well, this book got no response whatsoever, need to replace it. I need to assess my own work. Everybody needs to do that. And so those two are the top two on my list. That you can evaluate the information because you're flooded with it, and then you can assess your own work. And if we can teach them to do that, then I think they're really ready to go.
That's one of the things that is touted by homeschoolers. and I'm not here to promote that, but I just observe these things and listen to people who've been schooled that way. And I mean, there's various levels of success there too, as you all know. But one person told me that his parent, who was supervising his training, would not tell him things until he had gone and researched it himself, and that he was doing it at a very young age. And in public school, I guess because there is so much more socializing and so much more interaction with peers, is it possible we tend to develop the collaborative more? I'm just really exploring this a little bit.
I don't know, didn't it come from a business model? A lot of business were saying what they
They
wanted
were.
was,
Collaboration is one of the 4 Cs,
Right.
and it has risen to that level. It is, if you look at, and the 4 Cs, I think of the 4 Cs, and you guys have heard of the SOL, the Virginia SOL, and the Common Core. So the 4 Cs are kind of the Common Core version of our lifelong learner standards. So those are the ones that are adopted by 39 states or whatever, and really, so it's the same thing, just in slightly different terminology there. But, you know, when you look at things, if you go over to the engineering school at UVA, the engineering school's latest facility, Rice Hall, has these amazing spaces. And in fact, the librarian at Monticello, I just sent her over there to look at some spaces. We just talked about it yesterday in a walk that we were doing around one of our schools. These places where the areas are designed for 5 or 6 college kids to sit down, somebody to plug up a device to a monitor that's sitting there and collaborate, because that's how the kids are expected to work. So they're working 5 or 6 kids on a project, and the school is now providing them spaces to do that, so that they're not going to somebody's dorm room or having to go across campus to a library. So, you know, or Starbucks. So, you know, spaces all over the place. We saw a place when Rosalind went with Jen and me to the Fine Arts Library. An amazing section there where it was designed for probably 8 students to sit with 2 monitors going at one time in a circle to talk about a piece of artwork or whatever they were displaying.
well, Brownsville kind of has that, and that's.
Brownsville has that in their innovation
Right.
lounge. You know, so when you look at that, now, in the end, who's earning the degree? The group's not earning the degree, the individual's earning the degree. The universities and colleges are still maintaining a way to do that. And I think we're doing that, and I think we're doing a better job of that now than we were perhaps 10 years ago, by helping the kids with the social, emotional sides of group work, giving the kids some language and some skills. Part of Responsive Classroom would absolutely have the kids dealing with that on their own. Christy, it's not fair that I'm doing all of the work, and we're both supposed to be working. I mean, kids would know how to say that to another kid. So I'm feeling really, really positive about that. I think this is really coming together where we've got a combination of changing some of our people structures and some of our places in a way that's really going to make for some powerful opportunities for kids.
One more question. Are we out of time?
We've got about 2 more minutes until people start transitioning. So we were 10 after, we're supposed to start transitioning to start back again at 8:20.
So what's your question?
Well, this is still on the
Yeah.
collaboration and individual. Do students ever get confused after doing a lot of collaboration and then being given a task where they're required to work on their own and cheat?
I would, well, it was interesting the other day when I was having the 8th grade do this pre-assessment on critically evaluating a piece of text. They sat down, there were 3 to a table, 2 on one side, 1 at the other. So they immediately broke into working on it together. Immediately. That was their natural way of functioning. I think they do have difficulty with it, and it has to be made really, really clear. And there's, and it's hard because I think they are so used to working together that it's difficult.
Yeah, I've been hearing this in higher education as well.
one of the benefits of a flexible space too, because you can have the space set up one way when they're supposed to be working collaboratively, and a different way when they're working
Yes,
independently.
I have a great picture of a table in a kindergarten classroom. It's actually two trapezoidal tables put together as it looks like a butterfly. But they went for the kids to have their own space, but then when they're working together, they put it together so it's more round. And the kindergartners moved the furniture, so it's trapezoidal tables without legs. You took the legs out. So when you think about that, so, and things like the reading time, you walk into a classroom during the sustained silent reading, and you may see two kids curled up in a corner sharing a book, but the default there is that they're reading alone and they're writing in their journal by themselves, so I think, there's definitely that alone time, that individual accountability time, but also the preparing the kids to work collaboratively with a different skill set than they would have had years ago before we were putting the emphasis on things like responsive classroom and even in Avid, Jewett's got an amazing, got Avid running at an amazing level now, and I know that the teachers that are supporting those kids have an eye on how kids are behaving at UVA. They have an eye on how kids, how are kids expected, to interact with each other and with their environment, with their content at UVA and other colleges, and really how do we help kids understand that you're kind of doomed if you get that reputation as a slacker in one of those advanced college classes. You're doomed. So how do we teach kids to be mindful of how what their work ethic is and how.
I don't know. It's interesting that you say that there's this idea that they're doomed. I mean, what are they? The kids know who they are, or I mean, the thing is how do you how do you prevent that? How do you prevent slackers from being in your group? I mean, I'm all for collaboration, but I'm telling you that every group I've ever been in where I've had to collaborate, there's always been, slackers and people not pulling their weight. I mean, it makes you want to do the whole thing by yourself, I mean, just so that you can avoid that. And it's, it's happening with, my husband and I took, online classes, and you've got to do collaboration in online classwork as well. I mean, you've got to, I would say that there's probably more collaboration going on in an online class than there is in an actual class, because everybody's got to post on the forums, on the message boards, or nobody can get their work done. If you've got to post 3 times and nobody else is posting, and you've got to...
You can't respond.
You can't respond
Right.
if someone hasn't posted.
And the body of research about that is saying that actually you maximize the potential for all of those affective sides of learning when you operate in a hybrid environment.
Absolutely.
And so there's that, because there's a lot of research that says, I mean, imagine even a child with a disability. Nobody knows in that online environment that you're blind, or you can't, you have a speech impediment. Nobody knows that. So that there's a level of acceptance there that doesn't exist in a face-to-face community. But then at the same time, most of the world is still face-to-face in many of our interactions, so we have to do that. So, and you heard Len talk about, actually both of you used the term hybrid. That's one of the things that we're looking at. How do we make sure that we have a wide range of tools available to kids, that kids are widely skilled, so that we can move in and out, because as Kathy Thornton said, we have no idea what the future's going to be.
Right.
So
That's
the best we can do for our kids is to prepare them to accept and to control whatever's coming.
I want them to know how they learn.
And that's the
and
only
how they
thing.
can maximize that, so that when they leave us, they can just keep on learning and learning and learning.
So I think that's a critical piece.
I really think that's important. I just want them to be able to learn so they can go to the next stage, whatever it is.
Any other questions, Barbara and Pam? We have about 6 more minutes before the rest of the board comes back. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Christy. You're welcome to stay. The board will come back from each of the 3 pieces, and they'll jigsaw, which is a collaborative learning strategy.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, that was
So
excellent.
they will jigsaw. You're welcome to stay.
It's a very
There's your first day.